Before you really take that big step, you got to create your own local ecosystem that's building a structure that's going to help you get out there.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Entrepreneurship 101. And hello to our webcast audience, and especially our satellite groups at NORCAT in Sudbury and Innovation Factory in Hamilton. Apparently their audiences are growing quickly, and I think they're soon going to outnumber our live audience here. So a big applause to them. Tonight's lecture is called Entrepreneurial Ecosystem and Legal Fundamentals, and what our speaker tonight is going to focus on is the basic nuts and bolts of starting a business as you're moving through the journey of becoming an entrepreneur. Looking at the ecosystem in which your business operates, some of the things that you're going to need to know are how to register your business and some of the tax considerations, as well as the different partners that you're going to need to connect with to ensure that you're successful. I'm very pleased, especially tonight, to welcome our speaker. Tony Redpath is a senior fellow at Mars. He's a reformed entrepreneur and recovering venture capitalist. This is what he told me. I didn't make that up. And at Mars, he works to find funding sources that help grow our external and internal programs. He's also a chemist, and as such has an interest in advising entrepreneurs and high-growth companies, particularly in the environmental and advanced materials and manufacturing sectors. And Tony is an avid beekeeper. He spends his weekends at his family's hobby farm, and he's been keeping bees for over 10 years, and he loves them so much. I don't know if any of you know this, but he loves them so much that he spread his keen love of bees to the rest of us Martians, and we actually have 2 hives on the roof upstairs. And we're harvesting honey a couple of weeks ago. But most importantly, Tony is the co-founder of the Entrepreneurship 101 program, which he started with his colleague Cynthia Go about 9 years ago. So we're very excited to welcome him back. He was actually off last year, having bionic knees installed, so we really missed him. Please welcome Tony tonight.
So thank you, Marielle. You said you had a few sneaky things to say about me. I have to think of something to get back before the end of the talk. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Entrepreneurship 101. I cannot tell you how many hundreds of times I've said that, and I'm absolutely delighted to be back up here speaking to you. Nuts and bolts of starting a business. I think last week's lecture, you heard about sort of different types of business. You want to be a sole proprietorship, if you're going to be a consultant. You want to start a company. Okay, so now we're going to take it the next step and say, okay, you're going to launch your business. What do you have to do? Good. I should have a disclaimer. You now know I'm a chemist. You're going to be getting legal advice from a chemist. You know what that's worth. What I'm going to give you is advice from an entrepreneur's perspective about what I think you need to do. Much of that involves lawyers or accountants and all that. Okay, but heaven forbid I should actually offer legal advice. So you're going to start an ecosystem. More importantly, what this course is going to tell you about longer term is creating your company and fitting it into a bigger ecosystem. I like to think that, there's a whole ecosystem of companies out there selling products, services. They got customers, clients doing all sorts of things. You got a new idea, had an investor in a fund I was part of who said, the world works. Fundamentally, it's true. It gets on, maybe not perfectly, but without your idea, it's managing. You got to get in there and you got to elbow your way in. You're going to compete with people. You will maybe displace somebody else. That's fitting into an ecosystem. Before you really take that big step, you got to create your own local ecosystem that's building a structure that's going to help you get out there into that big, tough, competitive ecosystem and really survive and thrive. So today, I'm going to slowly walk you through how you go about building your local ecosystem. The beginning, it's you, Inc., and your customers. I deliberately didn't start by saying it's you and then add in your customers, because if there's one thing you're going to learn in this course, without your customers, you're nothing. So those two go up at the very start. The premise is you are there to serve some set of customers. Well, you're going to have suppliers. So, simple concept. You will be making wing nuts. Okay? You have a supplier that sells you, okay, I'm a material scientist. You cut steel, you make wing nuts, and you sell them to your customers. You could do this as an individual. And if you're offering a consulting service, then you may well do that just as an individual, because your company is basically you and the knowledge that you provide. But most of you, and most of this is premised around the idea you will have a number of people and you will actually want to work as a group. You don't want to do that personally for liability reasons. You order $1 million worth of steel to cut wing nuts and the orders get canceled, you're personally responsible for that. That's why the concept of the limited liability company was created. And it is precisely that. That's that LTD, limited. It is a separate legal entity, and you're not responsible for its debts. The company is responsible. It is a buffer that creates an entity to do business. You may own that entity or a part of it, and we'll get to that. It's a structure that allows you to do all sorts of things, including protecting personal assets from your business life. And I think we've all heard horror stories of people deliberately doing that to take advantage of people, take money, and we won't go into that sort of thing. We'll think about the good reasons for doing this. So, I'm going to assume that you've decided, okay, you need to create a company here. How do I go about doing that? This is the first step in really creating something in my own ecosystem. It differs somewhat for-profit and not-for-profit, but the process is much the same, and it's complicated. Okay, this is not something that you wish to master in your own spare time, okay? This is where I'm going to say, don't attempt to do this at home, folks. We've listed here, and obviously the slides go up, we've put lots of links in to the Canada Business Corporations Act. It's about that thick and pretty impenetrable. I once actually had to read a fair amount of it. Not-for-profit, that's a sector I'm not that familiar with, but there are nuances and complexities. Are you not-for-profit? Are you a charity? That, again, I don't advise really mastering the detail. You can incorporate federally. You can incorporate provincially. From my perspective and my own knowledge of the for-profit sector, pros and cons to each. And bottom line, I have never seen it make a great deal of difference in companies I've either run or invested in. But if we move ahead here, some people say, oh, you need to create a US corporation. If you're for profit, the reason for doing that is if you wish investors from the United States to invest in you, they get much more favorable tax treatment in a US corporation than investing in a Canadian corporation where the Canadian government taxes them. The rules have been changed in the past few years, so the difference is not as great. But let me tell you, if you are just starting out and this is your first company, don't even think about that. The legal fees for setting up what are known as butterfly companies, a Canadian and US, with shares that exchange so that money can flow into the US to escape Canadian tax, it's expensive. Don't even think about it right now. Start simply, set up in Canada, whether it's Ontario or federal, doesn't really matter. When you incorporate, you have just made two new friends, the federal tax department and the provincial tax departments. The federal tax department actually is two separate friends because you pay HST and you pay federal corporation tax. I laugh about it, but the moment you incorporate, you are going to get business numbers. You are going to be doing tax filings on an annual basis. It's part of doing business as a company, which is why I say it's complex, hire an accountant. Somewhere between $500 and $1,000, and I know. When you're starting out, you don't have a lot of money, you're going to have to make decisions. You have limited amount of time, limited amount of money, right? This, to me, is a case, spend some of that money, take a professional's advice, because it'll be done, it will be done right. This is not something where you want to get the wrong entry in the wrong line. The forms are complex, and that will rebound for years to come as you try to correct it within the Canada Revenue Agency. Better to get some help, get it done right, and then move on to do what you're good at, which is designing and growing your products and landing customers, okay? So here's your new ecosystem, your friends up on the top there, and now you've got an accountant, part-time, who's available to help you with things. When you incorporate, and one of the reasons for incorporating a company is it allows you to have partners, co-founders. It creates a structure that allows you to work with and reward many people, not just by salary. So you will need a shareholders agreement. And I understand there's been a fair amount of questions about things like shareholders agreement. So let me talk basically about what a shareholders agreement does. Let's assume there was 4 of you who decided to found the company. 2 techies, a business person, and a marketing person. Great idea for a product. You're going to be 4 equal beneficiaries. So you have 4 founders. All that a shareholders agreement does is define the basic rules of the game. First off, how do you make decisions? If one of you wants to leave the company, how do you do that? If there's profits, how do those get divided? Now you may say, listen, I can write that out on a page. It's 4 equal, no problem. Okay. So, sadly, one of your partners becomes ill down the road when the company's reasonably successful. Really just wants to sell their quarter to deal with their health issues. Perfectly natural human need. It's not anything to do with dissatisfaction with the company and partners. So, how do you handle that? Can they go out and say, hey, I got somebody who'll pay me top dollar? If you allow that, then the other 3 members who are left say, who is this person who's coming in as a partner? Do I know them? Do I trust them? Do they have the same vision? We had 4 of us. We all started with the same vision. All of a sudden now, I could be faced with someone who has a totally different vision of what we're trying to do. A shareholders agreement typically says, you want to exit, the first thing you have to do is offer your shares to your existing partners. And it will say 90 days, and if they don't, if one of them doesn't and the other 2, then the other 2 get the right to have, split, the one who didn't want, and all this mechanism. And only if they decide not to exercise their rights, then you can go outside. But at least there's a mechanism to protect the existing shareholders. Simple thing. How do you make a decision with an even number? Okay, what happens if it's 50-50? 2 for, 2 against, and it's a major strategic decision for the company. You don't want to get to that point and not know how to handle it. So a shareholder agreement will have a decision-making mechanism. And it may say, if you can't agree, you will go to arbitration. It bakes in all of these things. And the reason that shareholder agreements get sometimes quite thick is every time there's been a real mess, the lawyers will say, you know, if we'd put this clause in, we would have prevented that. And every shareholder agreement after that has that clause. Well, there's any number of ways you can create a mess in a company. So the clauses get added to, but they're all there to deal with situations that might come up when a group of people are running a company and money is on the table, because trust me, people's attitudes change when there's money at stake. That's all that a shareholders agreement is designed to do. It can be very simple. It can be very complex, but it's really an understanding of how you're going to work together, and it anticipates a number of fairly standard situations and says, if this happens, then we've all agreed up front, this is the mechanism and this is what we do. So if you're going to do that, and I just think in here, okay, assignment of intellectual property. So the 4 of you have decided to create this company, and you're all inventors on a patent. One of the first things you want to do is ensure that each individual assigns their rights into the company. We had a company that our fund invested in, and after about 6 months, and there were 4 founders, one of them had a falling out with the other 3. And he said, nope, I didn't sign my assignment. So my piece of the patent isn't in there. And for example, on US law, each independent inventor on a patent can practice the entire patent without talking to the others. So all of a sudden, you don't have a monopoly. You've got someone who could, in theory, go out and license the patent to a major competitor. Fortunately, we had the document that said, yes, he had assigned it. But there was a mechanism, and unfortunately, it doesn't always make things happy, because when there's bad blood, his patent was in there, but he wanted his stock to be sold. He wanted to sell, because he didn't want to have anything to do with his erstwhile friends. And then we had to trigger all those processes basically to buy him out. But there was a process there to handle it. So it sounds like, you know, these are my friends and we're starting a company. Why am I fussing over this? The reason is that They're your friends now, but you'll be amazed at what can happen. This is just a defensive mechanism here. You need a lawyer to do this. Most high-tech lawyers will have a standard shareholders agreement, a basic template, and it's not that hard for them to customize it for you. In fact, the education team has on the Mars Entrepreneurs Toolkit a standard shareholders agreement template for you to go through and see basically what's in it. And I'll give you the links in just a bit. But go to a lawyer and get the agreement drafted. The other reason for creating a company is it provides a mechanism for people to join or people to invest. You want to raise $1 million? Trust me, as a VC, I'm not going to give you $1 million personally, but I will put it into a company, and in exchange for that cash, I will own a piece of the company. All of that shareholder agreement, now the people putting money in are saying, yes, there are rules of engagement that are defined. Everybody understands the rules. Good, I can put my money in, and there's no, misunderstandings here. So that's the other key reason for incorporating. It is a vehicle for investors to come in to help you really kickstart and grow your business. One of the things that you have to do when you incorporate is to create a board of directors. Many people say, come on, sure, I've incorporated. Well, there's two of us in the company. So I'm the president, and that's the vice president. And yeah, we're both shareholders. So the shareholders elect a board, and the board appoints the management. They say, yeah, well, there's two of us. There's two shareholders. We both sit on the board, and we're both management. So we hold board meetings in the elevator on the way to work. You can do that, and it's not uncommon. A board of directors gives you a mechanism for reaching outside of your closest group for people who can help you. They can join your board, you can reward them with some stock, and they bring a fresh and different perspective. Most investors, if they're looking at a company and say, well, the board is me and my mother sits on it, and I'm thinking of putting my brother on it, no. I want independent thought. I want people there whose objective is to help the company and who bring, maybe it's a major customer who's willing to have a ringside seat on a hot new technology and will coach you. That's invaluable. So now your little circle, one more thing before I get to this. The other thing that you need to think of while we're on the topic of agreements is sooner or later you're going to hire somebody, okay? And I think there's a talk on, hiring and staffing. It's not just, well, I'm going to hire a consultant to help me. You will actually really want staff. Remember those friends in Ottawa and the province with taxes? There's payroll taxes will have to go to them. The moment you hire somebody, literally within 24 hours, you have to register with WSIB, Workplace Safety something board, okay? It's up there. And insurance, of course. It used to be workers' comp. That's a legal requirement if you have employees. And it doesn't matter if it's your brother or sister, they also have to be covered by WSIB. So I know this sounds bureaucratic. Again, that's why you want your accountant in there. And bingo, I'm going to come back to this. Now, you've got your suppliers, your customers, you've got an accountant, you've got a lawyer who's helping you, you've got a board of directors, you're great friends with both the federal and provincial tax agency and workers' comp. It's not as hard as I've made it look here, because when your accountant does it, they just say, here are all your numbers. And when you come to year end, we'll fill in all the forms and it all takes place, because that's what I do. A little better with my own company. It's a little better than taking a shoebox in, but not much. At an early stage with a small company, it's not that hard to do. But it is important, because when you are in business, if you don't report to workers' comp, you can be in a lot of trouble if there's an accident. So it's, I don't minimize it. You really do need to do this. These are legal requirements. And God forbid you should not remit your payroll deductions. Government takes a pretty dim view of companies not sending that money in, because it is not your money. It is your employees' money that you have collected to send in on their behalf. And there are very serious penalties for not doing it or for taking it and paying the rent, for example. That can get you and your board in some serious trouble. So, okay, I was going to go back. This is just to remind me to tell you, on the Mars website of the Entrepreneur's Toolkit, there's a sample template shareholders agreement. There's a sample employment agreement. Again, when you hire someone, you have to, you're in a high-tech business, okay? Ideas are your currency. The employment agreement has to specify if they invent something related to the company owns it. They have to sign off on that. They have to sign off that they cannot quit and take away all the core company secrets. And whether you're in a social entrepreneurship or a profit-driven company, these are valuable assets of the company, and you have to be clear. If you hire someone and you pay them, these are the rules of the game. They can't take this stuff and give it to someone else to let them basically compete with you. So again, there's a good template agreement there. There is a sample agreement for a general partnership. A term sheet, I put this on, we're not really going to talk much about it. Term sheet is a document that if someone declares a desire to invest in you, a term sheet is a simple summary of the basis upon which they will make an investment. I'll give you $1 million. I want 25% of your company. And I will expect to have final say on these following matters. There is a golden rule of investment. Does anyone know what that is? Precisely. He who has the gold rules. It's very true. So a term sheet will spell out the rules by which money will come into your company. Getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, there are lectures coming up involving investors, angels, VCs, and so forth. So we were here. Now, who else could you talk to? As if there weren't enough government agencies involved. You can register the name of your company, and depending on the business you're in, that may or may not be important. Now you're getting, and again, there's a good lecture coming up on intellectual property. Intellectual property is not just a patent. The name of your company can be extremely valuable. It's the sort of thing, it gains value as you gain traction in the marketplace. So you may want to register your name. How do I get tax credits? You're already in love with the tax department. There's a wonderful program called Scientific Research and Experimental Development Tax Credits, SHREDS. It's actually become both a noun and a verb, the shreddable activities. Basically, if you spend money on developing new products, new services, the money that you spend on that as a small company, you can get 35% of it back. Not against future profits, just back when you file your tax return. There's many a company that has survived on that recycling of their spend. So, again, now remember, you have an accountant. You're going to go and talk to your accountant about how do you keep records to take advantage of that. But now you've got an accountant in your little local ecosystem. So you can do that by picking up the phone with someone who knows how to do it. Because again, it's pretty complex. And if you don't get it right, all it does is slow down getting that refund check. And that refund check may be what's going to meet payroll this month. So you don't want to find, I said the wrong thing. It's worth the money you invest in a professional to do it right. And Canadian Intellectual Property Office, they have a great website and a lot of excellent material about patents, how to file, timing, and issues like that. So we were here. Slightly broader network. You're not just going to sit there talking to your accountant, your lawyer, and the tax department, right? You want to talk to customers? You want to build a professional network. And this is true, I don't care whether it's a for-profit or social enterprise. You are taking something to the market. You need to get out and circulate amongst people who are either your customers, who can help you get to customers, who can help you out. So, obvious thing comes to mind, join professional trade organizations. Trouble is, there are so many organizations, there are so many events. I tell people in business, for those of you from academia, I would say, don't go to the conferences, go to the trade shows. Go where the customers are. Hang out, where do you go fishing? You go fishing where the fish are. If you're looking for business, go where the customers are. Best money you can ever spend is buying a beer for a purchaser from a potential major client, and buy them another one and start finding out what are they really looking for. How, do they have any money to spend on new ideas, or are budgets absolutely frozen, in which case don't buy them another beer, find someone else who's got money to spend, okay? But you need to be out there. So I've talked about building this sort of your local ecosystem here, but I forgot to mention on a couple of the slides there, you are building this for long-term success, which is why I'm saying do it right, get professional help, so that as you go out there, you got a solid base and a solid base of professional advisors to get out and help you. So now we're talking about reaching out, trade shows, go to local groups, come to Mars. There are all sorts of special events here focused on different sectors. Network. You never know who's going to pass you on to a key customer or a key advisor. So, strong believer. Partners. Government officials, they can be. If you are in a business that has regulatory controls, get to know the folks who make those decisions. The same with your bank. We love to criticize banks. My first company that I ran, I was an accountant. I had never, things like this did not exist. I did not understand when I sat down with my account manager and said, well, I know we're overdrawn. There'll be a check in a week or so. What's your problem? And she had no concept about what we were trying to do with a technology company. And I won't tell you how many decades ago this was. But my advice to you, find out who your account manager is. Take him out for a coffee. Okay? When you desperately need to get a loan, that is not the first time to be meeting the person who could potentially give you that loan or an operating line of credit. Sit down with them. Get them excited. Share some of your passion with them about this is so exciting and this is going to make a ton of money. And you're going to be my banker and you'll look good. So stay with me on this one. Just become a known entity. So when you come in, you say, you know what? We just got that order. Unfortunately, I need $100,000 now so I can buy the raw material to make the product, right? Cash flow problems. You'll get lectures on later on. Okay, that's fine. You can sit down, your bank manager can say, this is what I can do, this is what I can't do, but I'm going to help you. You don't have to spend crush time, 10 minutes, trying to bring them up to speed on what you're doing. They already know that, and they're happy for your success. So make your bank account manager one of your friends. So it's getting crowded there. And I've added in Canada Revenue Agency for shreds, which is all rolled in with the tax department. I should use a different color, but that would be too obvious, I guess. And down here, trade associations, trade show, the bigger network. Now, I've shrunk that down because that's really your local ecosystem. What's going to make or break you is, yes, your customers are in there, in red, your competitors, because they're just waiting for you to come out there. Well, but you've got channel partners, you've got distributors, you've got VARs, value-added resellers. There are lectures. This is your go-to-market strategy. This is your business model. There are lectures upcoming about those. So I'm just saying this local ecosystem is getting a solid footing so you can get out and operate in that much bigger one. I'm on my last slide with 19 seconds to go, which is not bad. Just a few things to do and not to do. Sounds obvious, but I can tell you in the dot-com bubble, a lot of people did not obey that first line. There were companies that blew through $100 million on marketing and fancy offices and got zero in customers. You're going to be lean and mean, okay? IKEA is wonderful. Use those wrenches. Hey, the stuff isn't bad, okay? It works. You know, one of the best things, one of the most important things you're going to need to manage is cash flow. You won't have a lot of money. Don't waste it on unnecessary things. Spend it on important things that save your time to do important things. Yes, and okay, you can paint. I've had company painting parties on the weekend to paint the lab because we couldn't afford to do it. With the price of some beer and pizza, you can do that. Assemble the IKEA furniture. Second point, do not hire your relatives just because they're there. And that extends if Uncle Fred is a real estate lawyer, do not rely on them for your shareholder agreement. These are specialized disciplines. You can rely on Uncle Fred to say he knows a good firm that does corporate law. That's fine. But just because they're in the family and they can give you a discount, can be very expensive in terms of the mistakes that they can make because they just don't know. There's lots of law firms out there that offer very good packages, in fact, for very small companies where you get your basic shareholders agreement, employees agreement, certain number of hours of advice, say on a customer contract, supplier agreement, for a fairly low price. It's a loss leader. They're counting on you growing. And when you're being acquired for $1 billion, they'll be doing the legals on that, and they're going to make out like bandits. So this is, an investment that they're making on helping you. Don't hire your old friends or family members. The joke I have about hiring family members is when you sit down for Thanksgiving dinner, there'll be 2 turkeys at the table. Okay. It's hard to fire them. What do you do if they're not working out? You don't have a lot of money. You don't have a lot of time. You really want to make your business grow. And again, it doesn't matter if this is social purpose. You want to achieve something. If you have a friend, old college mate, roommate, who can actually deliver, yes, but not just because they're your friend. And because I tell you, the sad thing is if you do hire them, it's unlikely that they will continue to be your friend at the end of it anyway, because, the rest of the folks you're working with are saying, she has to go. I'm sorry. They're holding the company down. So be fairly careful who you choose. Your early hires are crucial. Hire for attitude. You can teach skills, but good attitude and the right base skills, if they happen to be folks fine, but never just because, hey, they're there and they're not doing anything anyway. There's probably a good reason for that. The last, this ties in with employment agreements, shareholders agreements. Seen so many situations, we have a good understanding of what we're going to do. And we wrote it out on 1 page. And you get to the end and say, well, all of a sudden something comes up. Again, there's some serious money on the table. Oh, I thought that what I meant was this. Well, no, what I meant was that. Now we have a problem. We didn't structure it properly, so that handshake, never assume that it is actually correct. Write it down. Write it down at a minimum in as clear a language as you possibly can and sign off on it. If it's important enough, get a lawyer to do a simple document, because they will say, well, you haven't thought of this. Because the trouble is, they've seen all the disasters. You haven't. You're just starting out. You're about to make your own set of disasters and mistakes. They've seen all of them. What you rely on them. Never rely on a lawyer to tell you how to run your business. You tell the lawyer what you want to have happen. It's their job to say, if that's what you want, this is how we'll structure it. But have you thought of this? Oh, no, I hadn't. Well, here's how we can cover those off. And yes, the last thing, when my old chairman used to say, who wants to trap a thin mouse? When there's a fat mouse running around and all of a sudden there's some profits to be made, people sit up and take notice about little things they never paid attention to before because it was irrelevant. So that sounds negative. It's human nature. Corporations are human ventures. Just recognize it, structure them, build them for success, and go get them. That's it. Thank you. I think you guys all know the rules. There's microphones. If you've got questions, please come up to the mic. And there's online. I guess Marielle will handle.
Tony, we often get a lot of questions about non-disclosure agreements, and not just what goes into them, but even once you've signed one, how much should you be disclosing? So I was hoping you could elaborate on that a little bit.
Non-disclosure agreements are tricky, and I'm trying to not get myself into trouble with, the analogies of how much leg do you wish to reveal to attract some attention. Non-disclosure agreement assumes, and there is a sample one on the Entrepreneur's Toolkit webpage. I apologize, I didn't put the link in, but I'm sure you can find it there. You've got some secret sauce, okay? By adding a pinch of foo-foo dust to this mix, it's magic what it does. You want to partner with a major corporation. So, they want to see, well, what is it? You are not entirely sure. You don't want to say, here it is, and have them say, oh, thank you. We can do that. And, the fact that you've got a patent applied for is meaningless. They'll crush you, okay? If you can't enforce a patent, which means having the resources to take on somebody big, all a patent is a negotiating tool, fundamentally. And if you don't have the resources to stand at the table, it's not a very useful one. So a non-disclosure basically says, okay, I will disclose to you, and they're all standard. Every lawyer I have seen has a slightly different variant. It's like shades of off-white if you go to the paint store. There are hundreds of them, and they all look the same, but everyone will say passionately, that's the one. Basically, I'm going to tell you something that is confidential. You promise for a period of time, typically 2 or 3 years, that you will not tell that to anybody. Furthermore, you will not attempt to use that for any commercial purposes. And that this agreement does not anticipate a partnership or anything. It's just, I'm telling you something that I consider to be confidential. You have to treat it as such. It's the gist of it. Generally, you have to define or say, this, it doesn't cover my comments on the state of the weather today. But in this area of adding foo-foo dust to soup, this is what I consider to be my proprietary information. One of the reasons for doing this is, and again, you will have a lecture on intellectual property and patents. To get a patent, there are 3 things you must satisfy. It must be novel, useful, and non-obvious. From a patents office perspective, if you put your idea up on a website, that's a public disclosure. It's not novel. Doesn't matter if nobody ever looked at it. If it was made available to the public, you can't patent it, okay? So if I stood up here and said, my great business idea is this, and here's the secret, and told you here, I couldn't patent it. This would be a public disclosure. None of you are bound by confidentiality. If I'd had every one of you sign a confidentiality agreement before you came in principle, I would be protected. Now, there is the old story that 3 can keep a secret if 2 of them are dead. Confidentiality agreements, they're an attempt to demonstrate that this is something that's valuable and you want it kept secret. If someone wants to violate that, again, if they're big and you're small, there's not too much you can do, but it's at least demonstrating the principle. And the corollary to that is you don't have to disclose everything all at once. You're dating. Give them something to look forward to, okay? You can tell people, this is what my idea allows you to do. I've got this magic ingredient, and when you put it in soup, it tastes fabulous. I'm not telling you what the magic ingredient is. I'm telling you the effect. Now, are you interested, Campbell Soup, in this? Okay, let's talk a little bit more. When we start getting serious, then we might consider disclosing a little bit more about what goes in. But people say, I have to sign a non-disclosure agreement, and how much should I tell them? You tell them enough to get them to the next step, but you don't say, here it all is, unless you're really desperate. It's a negotiating game. Your patent of application, your trade secrets, and your NDA are all tools that help you with this little dance and this dating game to get people more and more interested. So that's my quick summary of NDAs and how to use them.
Thanks,
I
Tony.
guess down on the mic here.
I just, sorry, I'm just going to make a note to the audience. I've been posting a lot of the links that Tony mentioned about shareholder agreements and the SHRED program in the Entrepreneurship 101 LinkedIn group. So if you're not part of the group, you can just search Entrepreneurship 101 on LinkedIn, and we're putting all the information in there, and his slides will also be posted there on Monday. So you have easy access to all this information.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Hi there. It's Fareed from Gentleman's Post. I know that you emphasized on having an accountant on the board, and 100% that's something that everybody needs. But my personal experience, because we had little money to start with, we used a program called Wave Accounting, which to this date, I mean, it does the job. So that's my first recommendation. The second recommendation that the question that actually I have is this. If you're looking for advisory services, such as marketing, you know a person that is great in marketing and you want them to advise you, and you sort of remunerate them or pay them through equity share, do they become employee or they can be a consultant? And if you can do both of those, what are the pros and cons of it?
Okay. First off, one thing on accounting, I separate bookkeeping from the sort of accounting activities here, which is tax filing, corporation filing, and that. Bookkeeping, you need, early stage, you can use an Excel spreadsheet. Do what you do at home. It's not that, and then there's lots of great accounting software, absolutely. You should be able, don't pay a professional to do that. Mm-hmm. If you've got enough revenues, then you can afford to pay one, and this is a good thing. In early days, you can keep track of most of that yourself. As I say, it's that interface with other complex groups like the government. Use a professional to facilitate that interface. Now, the second part was again on?
Sure. So we're looking to bring in marketing advisor.
Marketing advice, okay.
The only way we can pay them is equity. Can we hire them as consultant, or they're automatically employee? Or if you have a choice between consultant or employee, what are the pros and cons?
Equity is the most expensive thing you can give, okay? Consider that you are creating, Google. 10 years from now, that 1% is worth, how many $100 million? That would have been yours, but you sliced it off. Mm-hmm. That said, many companies go nowhere, and so that payment actually amounts to nothing, so that person is taking a risk. Mm-hmm. You're balancing limited cash with limited stock in the company. If there is no cash, I wouldn't give away large quantities of equity. Mm-hmm. Some people say, I'll give you 5%, and never give it up front. Mm-hmm. Pay out, okay? That's what, corporations, you can create an ESOP, employee stock option plan. That's a way of giving stock to employees, but it's earned. You say, you can earn 3% of the company over 4 years. So they have to work and deliver, and it's generally the board that decides whether to grant it or not. Mm-hmm. And so, again, particularly with an outsider you're hiring, say, as a consultant, you hire them as a consultant, so whether you pay them with cash or with stock, it's much the same relationship. The same way you wouldn't pay them cash until they delivered. And if they hadn't, you might balk at, accepting their bill. Same way with paying for stock. Pay for performance. That would be my advice there. And costs, equity is always expensive because you're giving away there's only so much in the company, and you're giving it away when it's really worth very little. So paying someone $1,000 a day when your stock is worth pennies, when the stock's worth thousands, yes, you'd only give away microscopic amounts, but typically by that time you pay cash because you've got cash. Early days, keep it reasonable on the promise or the premise that it will become immensely valuable. That's why you don't take a large salary as the founder of the company. You make your money on the stock value, the equity that you're building into this beast, not on the salary you take home. If you're successful, the value of the company will dwarf your pay.
And when do you hire someone as a consultant, someone as an employee? That was one of the questions also that I raised.
Again, government has very clear rules on that, because lots of people say, oh, no, they're just a consultant. There's a checklist of tests. Do they have an office in your place? Do they have decision-making authority? Let's see. Are they spending more than 50% of their time in your venture? Check. If you go check to enough of these, it doesn't matter what you call them, they're an employee. Mm-hmm. And the difference is, for an employee, you have to collect payroll deductions and remit them. And this is a constant battle, and the rules are very clear. And it's on, I'm sure we could find the link and post that. There's just a half a dozen questions, and they're common sense. Does this person manage people, make decisions, show up for work 4 days out of 5, collect a regular paycheck? Looks, walks like a duck, talks like a duck. Well, that looks like an employee to me. And CRA will say, I don't care how you have structured it. Say it's a consultant's agreement. No, it's not. You collect and remit those taxes.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much.
Good.
Appreciate it.
We'll switch over to here.
Hello, good evening. Thank you very much. My name is Zach from Ryerson University. Thanks for sharing your experience and advice. My question is, at the very early stage of forming the team, more specifically when looking for the co-founder, do you have to worry about the non-disclosure agreement, shareholders agreement, and when or how early should you start thinking about doing all the good stuff you talked about?
You don't start worrying about a shareholders agreement until you've basically agreed, hey, we're going to get together and form a company on this. So I wouldn't worry about things like that. What you do need to worry about is if you're bringing someone in to be a co-founder, what's in your mind? Are you getting 80% and they get 20? Or are you bringing in someone that you're willing to say, hey, I want someone who's going to be 50-50 with me? Those are things that are key. Non-disclosure, this is where this is not legal advice. You don't want to get all legal with someone that you're planning to partner with. What you can say is, look, this is confidential. You have to understand that, and you're gauging their response. There's a bit of a risk, but you shouldn't be disclosing anything if you've not done enough checking to be pretty comfortable that this is someone you would seriously consider partnering with. Okay.
So in terms of splitting up equity, this is something that you advise to talk about straight from the beginning?
If you're initiating this, you need to have that clear in your mind. I was mentoring a company here in Mars, and I was dealing with one guy, and he was so excited. He was bringing this potential partner in who had marketing experience, was going to be great. And he brought him in one evening for the first session for the two of them to talk with me. And within 15 minutes, they were looking at one another, and the new guy was saying, well, that's not what I thought I was getting. And I just kind of stepped back, and I watched it melt down in front of me. It's sad. They had kind of danced around the understanding. It's one of those things. This guy thought this, and this guy thought this. Crucial issues, control. Oh, yeah, I want you to be in. I will make the decisions. That was what that foundered on. The guy's saying, no, I'm not going to spend all my time working with you and be subject to your decisions. We'll do them jointly. And they hadn't talked about that. And it literally just imploded in front of my eyes. And I didn't have a flak jacket on, so there wasn't a lot I could actually attempt. It's sad. They hadn't thought clearly. The guy who had founded it hadn't thought clearly and hadn't communicated exactly what his intentions and expectations were.
Okay, thank you.
That's okay.
Thank you.
Tony, I'm going to take one last question from the webcast before we have to finish. This one's from Norcat, and first they wanted me to tell you that they love your beard. And they're wondering, for a startup with 5 founders, is it common that each would assume 20% of the ownership, or is there strategic value to giving some more ownership or shares, for example, the CEO?
Again,
So if you have 5 founders at a startup, do you divide up the shares equally? Or is there any strategy behind giving one person more shares or ownership in the company than somebody else?
there's an important timeline there. Founder shares are given for what people have accomplished before you created the company. If one person steps in to become CEO, they may earn more shares as they go downstream because they are taking on more responsibility. But the divvying up of shares at time zero, if you will, really should reflect what people have contributed to the concept, to the idea. And so it's not necessarily equal. I've seen companies started by a research team, 4 people, and the percentages ranged from 50 down to 5. The key there is that everybody is happy with their percentage and thinks it fair. Because the worst way to start out a partnership or a company is with somebody sitting there saying, well, I got screwed. So I'm damned if I'm going to help this venture succeed. I mean, talk about shooting yourself in the foot. Okay, so but equal 20% for 5 may be grossly unfair. Somebody who, spent a few afternoons, had a cool idea to help, as opposed to someone who's been working on the basis of this for 3 or 4 years, I wouldn't reward them equally. But it's one of those things you have to sit down and say, come on, what's fair here? There will be different opinions. You try to settle it so that everybody is more or less happy, because you want everybody working to make it succeed. And the simple answer to that, the value of a company when you start it is exactly 0. For the scientists, it's all potential, no kinetic energy. You have to start saying, I'm going to bust my butt to make this thing succeed. I will build value, and then whatever percentage I was granted will actually really be worth something. But if people aren't willing to do that, then it will remain worthless. And that's a VC speaking. Sorry.
Thanks, Tony. I'm sorry that we don't have time for the remaining questions, but I'm sure Tony will be happy to stick around.
I'm happy to stay
minutes.
here and do one-on-ones, or if we want to stay with the mics, I know I'm terrible at this.
We've stayed right on time. So
Yes, okay.
Thank you very much, Tony. Thanks for joining us.
Okay.